I wonder if in the moments of his departure from Sudan, there was any risk to him of being taken into custody and passed along to the Americans or the Saudis for that matter. Was he in jeopardy of that at that point?
Several people have speculated that he was, and that one of the things that had happened is the Sudanese government had really had what's called a lockdown agreement, that there was no possibility that either the Egyptian or American authorities would bar him from leaving, because in a sense everybody thought if he could go back to Afghanistan, which was now becoming a failed state, there's no way that he could succeed. In other words, the judgment of a whole lot of people, including unfortunately the Clinton administration, said Afghanistan was really important in our battle with the Soviet Union, but the Iron Curtain fell, the Soviet Union was over, welcome to the 1990s. Afghanistan is not important. Charlie Wilson's war hadn't been done yet as a movie, so there's a sense in which Afghanistan seemed to be as safe a place as bin Laden could go. So in one sense, people were happy to have him go. All the parties who were most worried about him, the Saudis, the Sudanese, the Egyptians, the Americans, thought he's going back to, as it were, the mountains, the caves, the place of no return.
So this return to obscurity, let's say, is what they expected. Mm-hmm. But then in your book here, we come to the first of his statements in 1996, which is taken to be his declaration of war on the United States. Now, I'll ask you about the content of that, but first let me hear a bit about the circumstances that led him from the wilds of Afghanistan to come forth with such a statement.
Well, remember, he's in Afghanistan and he's reunited with some people whom he knew less than 10 years earlier, people that now are also feeling that they have been sideswiped, they've been removed from the centerfold of world history, and they're now feeling very much that they have to reclaim the importance of Afghanistan. There's also an internal battle going on. A major battle going on in Afghanistan is who is going to run this country. There has been a coup. There has been a replacement of government. The Taliban have come to power, and the Taliban was a movement again which nobody foresaw. And these people say, we represent an Islamic Republic, and bin Laden is one of those people who will help us achieve it. So ironically, he found in Mullah Omar and the Taliban a kind of soulmate, if you will, at least an ideological partner, if not a soulmate, that allowed him, and the other person we haven't mentioned so far is Ayman Zawahiri. Ayman Zawahiri, who has his own trajectory, his own past history with the regime of Anwar Sadat and then Hosni Mubarak.
All in Egypt.
And he brings with him, many people have said, a kind of expertise in practical thinking, because after all, he's a doctor, a trained medical doctor, but also someone with a lot of experience in organizing resistance and also counter-attack movements as somebody outside the government and outside the organized military channels of Egypt. So in one sense, being able to unite with Mubarak, with the Mubarak's major opponent, Ayman Zawahiri, being able also to find people who really remembered him and thought of him as one of the influential figures in the victory of the Afghans against the Soviets, made it possible for him to actually organize what then became Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was a name, but it was a name without an actual profile. The profile came into being in this period around the mid-90s, 96 on, in Afghanistan and Tora Bora.
So he's in Afghanistan. He has this relationship evolving with the Taliban.
Right.
He comes out with the first of his many statements to the world, and in 1996, the first of which is essentially considered today as a declaration of war on the United States.
Right.
What was his thinking and what motivated this? What was the content of his message?
The content of his message was that the world is now clearly divided into two. For those of us who still remember the Cold War, it seemed like the world had always been divided into two. But in the 1990s, it wasn't clear which were the two sides anymore. It was no longer the Soviet Union and the United States. It was no longer the communist world and the free world. It was, for bin Laden, a new kind of dichotomy, but even more severe. It was between the Muslim world, which had been the vanguard, the leader of the entire global civilization in the pre-modern period, and now was reduced to being splintered states, all of which were the captives of enemies. The enemies were, in this case, not just the United States and the feckless Saudi rulers, but also Israel. And so one of the things that really happens very strongly in this first lesson is he calls this whole group the Zio-Crusader Alliance. This is a neologism, as nearly as I can tell, and everybody who studied bin Laden, that this is something which he may have heard from Abdullah Azam, but it's something which he picks up and then promotes to a different level of importance by saying the whole world is divided up into those who are for us, who represent the Muslim Ummah, who understand its purity and understand those passages in the Quran which say, you will always stand up for your rights, you Muslims, against Jews and Christians. And he takes those passages and says, that means you always fight them, slay them, you never stop fighting people, and you never have as, who are Jews and Christians, and you never have them as friends. And what I have pointed out on this brief and very important point is that those passages are not taken full scale. In other words, he takes parts of them, the parts that say, if this happens, but the preceding and qualifying part is, if you can't make truce with them, if they do not yield to entreaties, etc., etc. So it's always a qualified message. For him, it's a wholesale, bottom, stop, exclamation.